Welcome to Plymouth, Massachusetts, America's hometown. Over 340 years after the conclusion of King Philip's War, the citizens of Plymouth are gathered here to celebrate the annual Christmas tree lighting in front of First Parish in downtown Plymouth. As the Christmas season gets underway, many people are not aware of the fact that right where they stand, King Philip's decapitated head was put on a pole where it would stand for 25 years. As they drank their hot chocolate and sang Christmas cheers, I asked them what they knew about the bloody conflict.
Well, I really don't know anything about it, other than I'm assuming that it was after the Pilgrims and landed here, and it happened in England because it's King Philip. That's about it.
Absolutely nothing.
It was a war fought between the English colonists, I think within a couple decades of their arrival here in Plymouth. I think it was one of the bloodiest wars in U.S. history by the impact to population as far as number of people deceased.
Not a whole heck of a lot, actually.
Plymouth, Massachusetts is a town that has always been dominated by history. Almost every citizen of the South Shore town knows the basics. They know about how the English fled their homeland and sailed over on the Mayflower to find religious freedom in 1620. The textbooks preach about the first Thanksgiving and peaceful relations between the Native Americans and Pilgrims. Knowing these facts all contributes to the booming tourist culture of Plymouth. People come to see Plymouth Rock or the Mayflower too from all around the country. Stores, restaurants, and hotels are named after famous pilgrims. All of these things contribute to the mass culture of history, and this rich history of Plymouth should be celebrated as it is. But we should also talk about the negative parts of our history. They too played a crucial role in the structure of our town. King Philip's War is just one example of these events, but it is far and away the most impactful. So how much of an impact did this bloody war between colonists and Native Americans have on the development of Plymouth?
King Philip's War involved most of the colonies in New England. It raged all the way from Plymouth Colony up into towards Deerfield and beyond. It involved every aspect of colonial New England at the time, from 1675 to 1676. It also marked the turning point. Up until that time, English colonists and native people were living more or less side by side. Interactions, if not on a daily basis, were on at least a weekly or monthly basis. There was a long-standing, fairly good relationship. But all of that changed once King Philip's War started. And it marked the end of this period where the two cultures were, if not in harmony, at least peaceably side by side. Once the war started, that all changed.
The war cost the colonists over 2,500 men. That was 30% of the overall population of New England at the time. Towns were attacked, some destroyed. Civilians were killed. The war was started over land. The Pilgrims were rapidly stealing land from native people, and finally a man by the name of Metacomet, otherwise known as King Philip, decided to start a rebellion with his Wampanoag tribe. To put it simply, the Native Americans were routed in the war and faced over 3 times as many deaths as the colonists did. Native culture would never be the same.
It wasn't destroyed completely, native culture in New England, but certainly it was forever changed. Native people had been still existing in their own communities, their own structures, their own society alongside the English. But after the war, many of them who could either fled towards northern New England, many were sold into slavery, many had been killed during the war. It was a fundamental rupture of their long-standing traditional structure in society. A lot of the older sachems were gone. The newer sachems, the younger sachems, faced different political alliances and allegiances. It also marked the sort of change in their fortunes in terms of what land they possessed, where they could still hunt or fish throughout the southeastern Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and these areas.
The direct cause of the war was the execution of 3 Native Americans suspected of killing an Indian informant for the colonists by the name of John Sassamone. There was little to no evidence that this actually occurred, but nonetheless the powder keg was ignited and the war began. But the assault on native culture began far before the war started, contrary to popular belief.
One of the main causes of the war was the conversion of many Indians to Christianity. In 1675, for example, there were 13 praying Indian towns, Christian Indian towns in Massachusetts alone. And there were others in other parts of New England. Of course, the Cape Cod Indians, many of them had converted to Christianity. And whenever an Indian converted to Christianity, he or she no longer owed allegiance to their father tribe. So the Indians felt that they were losing their identity, not only their grounds where they hunted, that they gathered food, but also their identity as a people. And they were being forced by the English to live under English law.
Many people have tried to revive the fighting spirit of King Philip, such as these people here, who partake in what is called the National Day of Mourning every Thanksgiving Day on Coles Hill in Plymouth. Unlike many others, these people recognize the importance of the war and other attacks on Native culture, but a lot of that is because they are Native American. For them, Thanksgiving is not a day of celebration, but rather a day of mourning for the loss of Native Americans in history. As evident by my interviewing at the town Christmas tree lighting, not many other people know very much about the war. So why has this war seemingly disappeared in history and become a forgotten war, as some describe it as?
Well, I think, for one thing, it happened a long time ago. We're talking about 1675, 1676. A lot has happened since then. Initially, I think that the English were ashamed of what they had done. After the savagery of the war had ended, for the next generation or so, they tended to forget about it. There was a revival in the early 1800s where the Indians were now seen not so much as savage barbarians, but as noble creatures of the forest, and that they had been actually heroes who had been treated shabbily. In fact, that's when Philip was made a hero. There were a number of plays written about him as a hero. This was in the early 1800s. So there was a revival of interest in King Philip's War at that time. But after that, the Civil War happened, and so much happened since then, I think, that people just tend to forget the early history.
So much death, so much impact on the country, but for some reason King Philip's War has gone through the cracks of history and has been forgotten by many. So why exactly is it important to remember this war?
I think King Philip's War is incredibly important to remember. It's a really pivotal moment in our early colonial history, especially here in Plymouth County. And it's also a really pivotal moment between the relationship between the colonists and Native people. I think it often gets overlooked, but its importance can't be stressed enough. This is when the second generation takes over in Plymouth Colony, and those personal bonds that really helped form the relationships between Massasoit and Winslow and all the original first generation people.
Well, to paraphrase the great American philosopher George Santayana, those who are ignorant of the past are doomed to repeat it. I think we have to learn from our lessons. And we also have to honor the past and realize that these things happened, and the reasons why things are the way they are today are based on what happened in the past.